Porus was an ancient Indian king whose territory spanned the region between the Hydaspes, river of Jhelum, and Acesines, Chenab River, in the Punjab region of the Indian subcontinent. He is credited to have been a legendary warrior with exceptional skills. Porus fought against Alexander the Great in the Battle of the Hydaspes, 326 BC, thought to be fought at the site of modern-day Mong, Punjab, which is now part of Pakistan. Though not recorded in any available ancient Indian source, ancient Greek historians described the battle and the aftermath of Alexander's victory. The only information available on Porus and his kingdom is from Greek sources. The Battle of the Hydaspes was fought in 326 BC between Alexander the Great and King Porus of the Purava kingdom on the banks of the Jhelum River in the Punjab region of the Indian subcontinent. The battle resulted in a Greek victory and the surrender of Porus. Large areas of the Punjab between the Hydaspes and Hydaspes rivers were absorbed into the Alexandrian Empire, and Porus was reinstated as a subordinate ruler. Alexander's decision to cross the monsoon-swollen river despite close Indian surveillance, in order to catch Porus's army in the flank, has been referred to as one of his masterpieces. Although victorious, it was also the most costly battle fought by the Macedonians. The resistance put up by King Porus and his men won the respect of Alexander, who asked Porus to become one of his satraps. The battle is historically significant for opening up the Indian subcontinent to ancient Greek political, Seleucid, Greco-Bactrian, Indo-Greek, and cultural influences, Greco-Buddhist art, which continued to have an impact for many centuries. The battle took place on the east bank of the Hydaspes River, now called the Jhelum River, a tributary of the Indus River, in what is now the Punjab province of Pakistan. Alexander later founded the city of Nicaea on the site. This city has yet to be discovered. Any attempt to find the ancient battle site is complicated by considerable changes to the landscape over time. For the moment, the most plausible location is just south of the city of Jhelum, where the ancient main road crossed the river and where a Buddhist source mentions a city that may be Nicaea. The identification of the battle site near modern Jalalpur, Haranpur is certainly erroneous, as the river, in ancient times, meandered far from these cities. After Alexander defeated the last of the Achaemenid Empire's forces under Bessus and Spitums in 328 BC, he began a new campaign to further extend his empire towards India in 327 BC. After fortifying Bactria with 10,000 men, Alexander commenced his invasion of India through the Khyber Pass. Whilst possessing a much larger army, at the battle, an estimated 40,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry crossed the river in time to engage the enemy. During this battle, Alexander suffered heavy losses compared to his earlier victories. The primary Greek column entered the Khyber Pass, but a smaller force under the personal command of Alexander went through the northern route, taking the fortress of Aornos, modern-day Passar, along the way, a place of mythological significance to the Greeks as, according to legend, Heracles had failed to occupy it when he campaigned in India. Here, the Hindu clans of Hindu Kush gave Alexander's army the toughest opposition they had faced, but Alexander still emerged victorious, despite being outnumbered, depending on the source, somewhere between 3-1 and 5-1. In early spring of the next year, Alexander formed an alliance with Taxiles, also known as Ambikima, the king of Taxila. They combined their forces against Taxiles' neighbor, the king of Hydaspes, King Porus, who had chosen to spurn Alexander's command for him to surrender and was preparing for war. Alexander had to subdue King Porus in order to keep marching east. To leave such a strong opponent at his flanks would have endangered any further exploits. Alexander could not afford to show any weakness if he wanted to keep the loyalty of the already subdued Indian princes. Porus had to defend his kingdom and chose the perfect spot to check Alexander's advance. Although he lost the battle, he became the most successful recorded opponent of Alexander, according to historian Peter Green. Porus's performance in the battle outclassed both Memnon of Rhodes and Spitamenes. Throughout the battle, Alexander is said to have observed with growing admiration the valor of Porus, and understood that Porus intended to die in combat rather than be captured. Hoping to save the life of such a competent leader and warrior, Alexander commanded Acesines to summon Porus for surrender. However, Porus became enraged on the very sight of his nemesis and tossed a spear at him in fury without bothering to listen to his proposal. Porus's aggressive response forced Acesines to take flight on his steed. In a similar manner, many other messengers dispatched by the determined Alexander were spurned until at last Morose, a personal friend of Porus, convinced him to listen to Alexander's message. Overpowered by thirst, the weary Porus finally dismounted his war elephant and demanded water. After being refreshed, he allowed himself to be taken to Alexander. On hearing that the Indian king was approaching, Alexander himself rode out to meet him and the famous surrender meeting took place. According to Arrian, Macedonian losses amounted to 80 foot soldiers, 10 horse archers, 20 of the companions and 200 other horsemen. However, the military historian J.F.C. Fuller saw Diodorus's casualty figures of 1,000 men killed as more realistic. This was certainly a high figure for the victorious army, and more than the Macedonian losses at Gaugamela, yet not improbable considering the partial success of the Indian war elephants. Indian losses 12,000 dead and over 9,000 men captured according to Diodorus. When asked by Alexander how he wished to be treated, Porus replied, "Treat me as a king would treat another king." Impressed Alexander indeed treated him like a king, allowing him to retain his lands. Following the battle, Alexander founded 2 cities in this region, one at the spot of the battle called Nicaea, Greek for victory, in commemoration of his success, and one on the other side of the Hydaspes called Alexandria Bucephalus, to honor his faithful steed, which died soon after this battle. In 326 BC, the army of Alexander approached the boundaries of the Nandu Empire. His army, exhausted from the continuous campaigning and concerned at the prospect of facing yet another gigantic Indian army, demanded that they should return to the west. This happened at the Hydaspes, modern Bs. Historians do not consider that this action by Alexander's troops represented a mutiny but called it an increase in military unrest amongst the troops, which forced Alexander to finally give in. Instead of immediately turning back, however, he ordered the army to march south, along the Indus, securing the banks of the river as the borders of his empire. Defeat of Porus by the Macedonians. The main reasons for the Pauravans' defeat were Alexander's use of tactics, and the Macedonians' superior discipline and technology. The Pauravans used chariots which were inferior to the Greeks' cavalry and phalanx. They did not have a well-supported military infrastructure or a standing army. The Pauravan infantry and cavalry were poorly armored, lacking in metal armor, and their short swords were no match against the long spears of the Macedonians. Porus himself failed to take the initiative, mainly trying to counter his opponent's moves. Greek historians agree that Porus fought bravely until the end. During the later rule of the Maurya Empire, tactician Kautilya took the Battle of the Hydaspes as a lesson and highlighted the need for military training before battle. The first Mauryan emperor, Chandragupta, maintained a standing army. The chariot corps played a marginal role in Mauryan military infrastructure.